Gabriella had just turned 15, and she was an ordinary girl from a poor family. Her father, Hugo, worked as a carpenter, and her mother, Isabella, sewed and knitted things to order. Gabriella's older brother, Pedro, who was 17, helped their father in the workshop. The family lived in a small but cozy house on the outskirts of the city. Gabriella went to school, walked in the park with her friends, and attended drawing and dance classes organized by the school for children from poor families. The girl liked her calm and measured life. But one day, trouble knocked on their door. Her father fell seriously ill, and a significant amount of money was needed for his treatment, which the family, of course, did not have. Naturally, when friends, acquaintances, and neighbors found out about what had happened, they all tried to help as much as they could, but it still wasn't enough. Then one of Isabella's friends, who was involved in trade, suggested that the young woman sell her products at the market. She said she would arrange with the right people to get Isabella a good spot for trading. The only thing left to do was to decide on the goods, which the woman didn't have. Isabella thought it over and decided that during the day she would continue to work on orders, and in the evening she would start sewing children's toys. Gabriella helped her mother with all her might. She cut out the details and sewed button eyes onto the finished toys. In addition, the girl came up with her own idea. Since Gabriella drew well, she suggested that her brother carve wooden horses, deer, butterflies, and winged angels, which she could beautifully paint with acrylic paints. Pedro gladly agreed. He liked his sister's idea. The family business was in full swing. Everyone did their best to help their father. After school and on weekends, Gabriella helped her mother sell the finished products at the market. They stood all day under the scorching sun, inviting customers. Sometimes things went well, and the toys sold out very quickly, but there were also times when they sold at most 1 or 2 items in a day. This greatly upset the girl because she really wanted to help her father. Day by day, the hand-painted wooden toys made by the brother and sister became better and more skillful, and customers were increasingly eager to buy them. One day, a distinguished man in his 40s in a light suit walked through the market. He was not very tall, with dark hair and tan skin. The man stopped to look at the painted figurines and examined them for a long time. Isabella and Gabriella saw that their potential buyer was very wealthy. He had a gold ring with a large gemstone on his hand, gold watches glittered on his wrist, and he smelled of expensive perfume. Finally, he looked up. "Glad to meet you. Could you please tell me who is the author of this beauty?" "I can see that it is handmade," the man asked politely. As he spoke, he smiled, and this made his face pleasant and charming. "This is the joint work of my son and daughter," Isabella replied. "My son carves the figures in the workshop, and my daughter paints them with acrylic paints, using her imagination." The man nodded, and his smile widened even more. "So, these are your masterpieces?" he asked Gabriella. The girl shyly smiled back. "My name is Alessio Negra. I am a sculptor, but now I mainly run a business," the man introduced himself, handing Isabella a business card with golden letters. Then he turned to the girl again. "And what is your name, señorita?" he asked. "My name is Gabriella," she replied. "I go to school and also take drawing and dance classes." "Wonderful, Gabriella," Alessio beamed. "I have a business proposal for you." Gabriella looked at her mother in amazement. She looked just as surprised as her daughter. She lightly shrugged her shoulders and prepared to listen to the man. "I'll start a little from afar. Many years ago, my mother, an ordinary seamstress from Italy, moved to this beautiful city. Here she got married and gave birth to a son, my father. When he grew up, he became a very good sculptor. His works were exhibited in city exhibitions more than once. It was from my father that I inherited my love for handmade work. I also trained as a sculptor, but I was not drawn to spend long, lonely hours in the workshop. I like being in the center of events, communicating with people, and making money. A lot of money. So I studied various business strategies for a long time and finally started my own business." The man paused for a moment and, taking a handkerchief out of his pocket, wiped the sweat from his forehead. May I offer you a drink? We have homemade lemonade. In such heat, one constantly wants to drink, said Isabella, taking out a clean paper cup. The man nodded gratefully. You can sit here, added Gabriella, pointing Mr. Negra to a free wicker chair, where the girl usually sat when there were no customers. Mr. Alessio sat down and, after taking several big sips, continued his story. My company produces and sells statuettes for interiors. Things are going well, and I have been thinking for quite some time that it is time to expand. These thoughts have been spinning in my head all morning, not giving me peace. I was trying to come up with something unusual and interesting while in the car when the driver was taking me to the office. On the way, we had a flat tire, and we had to stop to fix it. While the driver was doing the repair, I decided to take a walk and accidentally wandered into the market. When I saw your works, young señorita, an idea immediately came to my mind. How would you like to help me bring it to life? Gabriella could hardly believe what she had heard. You want me to be your business partner? The girl finally said. That's one way to put it, Alessio smiled. If it's convenient for you, we could meet at my office tomorrow and discuss the details. Come around 10 o'clock with your mother. Gabriella and Isabella exchanged excited glances, neither could believe what was happening. Meanwhile, Alessio's phone rang, and the man answered the call. Was the tire fixed? Great, I'm coming back. Saying this, Mr. Negra put the phone in his pocket and got up from the chair. Shaking hands with the mother and daughter in turn, he thanked Isabella for the lemonade and, before saying goodbye, asked, So, what will your answer be? I hope it's positive. Isabella smiled and hastily nodded. Yes, of course, we will come. The office address is on the business card. With these words, Alessio nodded one last time and hurried away. Isabella and Gabriella exchanged glances again, but this time their faces were glowing with joy. How lucky we are, the woman shared her emotions. I hope that cooperation with this businessman will help us quickly pay for Dad's treatment. Gabriella came closer and hugged Isabella. I hope so too, Mommy. The girl was eagerly and anxiously awaiting the upcoming meeting with Alessio. The next day, Isabella and Gabriella took the metro to the city center. The woman wore a white blouse with a bow and a strict gray skirt below the knee. The girl wore a pale blue short-sleeved shirt and a pleated blue skirt. Because of the meeting with Mr. Negra, Gabriella had to miss school, and Isabella did not go to the market and declined a new client's order. However, both hoped it would be worth it. Exactly at 10 o'clock, the woman and the girl were in Alessio's office. They were greeted by a pretty red-haired secretary who offered them to wait a bit. Mr. Negra will be with you in a minute. Can I offer you some coffee or juice in the meantime? Black coffee, please, Isabella nodded shyly. And orange juice, Gabriella added timidly. When the secretary left to prepare the drinks, the mother and daughter looked around the businessman's reception area. It seemed very cozy to them. The designers had painted the room's walls gray, and the couch where Isabella and Gabriella were sitting was bright yellow. On the walls hung photographs of figurines and other interior items sold by the company. The girl involuntarily imagined that one day the painted horses she and her brother made would also appear on one of the posters. At that moment, the secretary returned, carrying a yellow tray with drinks. Isabella and Gabriella had just finished their drinks when Alessio appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a beige suit with gray stripes and a shirt of a beautiful lavender shade. Sorry to keep you waiting. The traffic outside is terrible. With these words, he opened the door to his office for them. Isabella and Gabriella entered. Alessio pointed to two comfortable leather chairs opposite his desk and turned on the air conditioner. It's going to be another very hot day, he remarked. Then Mr. Negra sat at the desk and smiled at his visitors with a charming smile. Let's start with me sharing my thoughts with you. Gabriella nodded and took a notebook and pen from her purse. Alessio smiled when he saw this. It's commendable that you've decided to take notes. The girl blushed a little. Gabriella always writes everything down, Isabella smiled. It's a useful habit, Mr. Negra agreed. So, let's get to the point. When I saw your wooden figures, an idea came to mind. What if we launch a line of children's furniture with a similar design? Just imagine a chair in the shape of a horse or a bed with an angel at the headboard. I think it will be popular. Isabella and Gabriella looked at each other. That's a good idea, the girl said. I like it, her mother agreed. Alessio Negra smiled brightly. I'm glad you appreciate my thoughts. If you agree, I will invite the lawyer and we can draft the contract. Isabella nodded. Yes, we would be happy to collaborate with you, Mr. Negra, she said with dignity. Thus, a new life began for Gabriella. Now, immediately after school, a car with a driver would pick her up and she would go to the production site. There, she met with designers and worked with them on the project for a line of custom children's furniture. Gabriella liked the way the adult professionals treated her. With them, she felt like a professional herself, not just an ordinary child from a poor family. The project took several months to complete. Alessio himself rarely visited the production site, but his son Leo was often present. The young man was 18 and studying at a business academy, so he practiced and gained experience in his father's company almost every day. Leo seemed to Gabriella to be quite handsome. He had curly chestnut hair and bright green eyes. Leo wore glasses, which gave him an air of mystery. He looks a bit like a poet, the girl thought of him. Leo was always kind and friendly to Gabriella, and one day he even treated her to lunch at a nearby cafeteria. The young people chatted casually about various topics, discovering they liked the same music and books and had a lot in common. Let's go to a concert together sometime, Leo suggested, and Gabriella gladly agreed. She liked the young man very much. Finally, the project design was ready, and it went into production. Gabriella received a fee, and most of the money went towards her father's medical treatment. 2 months later, the presentation of the new children's furniture took place. Alessio Negra sent a beautiful invitation to Gabriella and Isabella. Dressed up, mother and daughter went to the ceremonial event. It was held in a large shopping center, decorated with colorful balloons and cardboard figures of horses and deer. For a moment, Gabriella felt like she had stepped into a fairy tale. Everything around her was so beautiful. The furniture, which she had worked on so long with the other designers, exceeded the girl's expectations. Gabriella stood for a long time, admiring the brightly painted chairs and tables. Then Isabella approached her. Dear, I need to leave. The doctor just called and said he wants to see me. Will you stay here without me? I'll come back for you in a couple of hours, okay? Of course, Mom, go ahead, the girl replied. Thanks to working on the project, Gabriella had become very independent, and she already knew many of the guests, so she felt at ease at the presentation. When her mother left, the girl gently stroked the smooth surface of one of the beds and noticed Leo. He was waving at her, and Gabriella waved back. The young man was wearing regular jeans and a white polo shirt, which suited him very well. When Leo came closer, he congratulated Gabriella and handed her a pink Gerbera on a long stem that he had been holding behind his back. The girl was very pleased to receive such a sign of attention. The young people strolled around the hall together, and then Gabriella noticed Mr. Alessio. He was not alone. His wife and younger daughter Mercedes, who had recently turned 6, were with him. They were dressed elegantly and constantly smiled at the reporters. Then Mercedes ran up to the custom furniture and sat at a table to pose for photographs. It looked very cute. Finally, the official part of the presentation began, and Alessio was invited to the microphone to give a speech. The businessman talked a lot about his company and what inspired him. Gabriella didn't listen very attentively. She watched Mercedes playing on the rocking horse, which was also part of their project. Then suddenly she heard Alessio's words. Many people ask me, where did I get the idea for my new children's furniture collection? It's simple, I was inspired by a girl. Yes, it was my daughter Mercedes. Gabriella froze in place. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. Did Alessio really say that? She began to listen closely to what the man was saying. Meanwhile, Senior Negra continued. Yes, it was Mercedes who told me one morning about an amazing dream she had. She saw magical furniture in the shape of horses, fawns, and butterflies in her dream. Since then, I've been inspired to bring my daughter's dream to life, to bring joy not only to her but to other children as well. Loud applause broke out. The guests were delighted with Alessio's story. But Gabriella suddenly felt nauseous. It seemed to her that everything around her had become deceitful and terribly fake. She felt that behind the guests' smiles, entirely different emotions were hidden: greed, envy, hypocrisy. For a moment, Gabriella swayed and felt very stuffy. At that instant, someone took her hand. She looked up. It was Leo. Do you want to leave? He asked quietly, and Gabriella only nodded in response. Yes, and as soon as possible, she whispered. The young people stepped out into the noisy street, and Gabriella took a deep breath of fresh air with pleasure. I don't know why my father deceived everyone, Leo admitted and added bitterly, I didn't expect this from him. Gabriella just nodded in response. It was a very ugly act, Leo added. I'll definitely tell him about it later. Then he looked at the girl and resolutely added, but for now, let's go somewhere and have some cocoa. You look awful. Gabriella allowed Leo to take her hand and lead her down the street. It seemed to her that all the passers-by were looking at them. She felt like Leo's girlfriend and caught herself thinking that she liked this feeling. It's a pity that I'm only 15 and just an ordinary girl from a poor family, Gabriella thought. I'm not a match for him. Finally, Leo stopped in front of a small but very cozy cafe on the corner. Let's sit here. I love this place, he said. They went inside, and a small silver bell announced their arrival. There were only a few tables in the cafe, and all of them were free. In a basket on the floor slept a large fluffy cat. Bright pots with blooming geraniums adorned the windowsills. Gabriella liked this place very much. Leo led her to a table by the aquarium and pulled out a chair for her, then sat down opposite. A waiter approached, and Leo ordered 2 hot cocos with marshmallows. Gabriella was very grateful to the young man for supporting her. My father really acted disgracefully, Leo repeated when the waiter brought 2 paper cups of cocoa. I understand he wanted to come up with a beautiful story for the press, but deceiving other people is low. Leo shook his head bitterly. It was clear that he was disappointed in his father's behavior. Surely, it was his young wife who put him up to say that. She never thinks about other people's feelings. Gabriella's eyebrows raised in surprise. So, it wasn't your mother? She asked Leo cautiously. No, my mother died when I was 6, and 5 years later, my father remarried. Gabriella lowered her eyes in embarrassment. I'm so sorry. She whispered. It's okay, it's all right, Leo replied and took the girl's hand. I hope you're not too upset, he said. Gabriella didn't know what to say. On one hand, she was grateful to Senior Negra for what he had done for her and her father. On the other hand, she was hurt that Alessio had presented the whole story as if Gabriella had never existed. I'm just a girl from a poor family and don't expect much from life, she finally answered. The main thing is that my dad is now healthy. At that very moment, Gabriella received a message from her mother. Dad is fine. He will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow. I'll be there in an hour. Mom. Gabriella wrote back that she and Leo had left the presentation and gave her the cafe's address. My mom will be here in an hour, she said. Then we still have time for a walk. There's a beautiful park nearby, the young man said. He paid for the cocoa, and they left the cafe. The park was indeed very beautiful. Shady alleys and a fountain in the center greatly impressed Gabriella, who had never been there before. I don't want you to think that life isn't for you just because you were born into a poor family, Leo said as they sat down on a bench in the shade of an acacia tree. Gabriella looked at the young man in surprise. She didn't expect such words from him. It turned out that he had been thinking about what to say to her all this time. Gabriella felt very pleased. You are very talented, Leo continued. And I'm sure you have a great future, Gabriella. All you need is to believe in yourself. And not let anyone treat you the way my father did. The girl nodded gratefully. She thought that over these months, Leo had become her best friend. It was a pity that now the work on the project was over, and they wouldn't see each other at the workshop as often as before. Gabriella sighed. It seemed Leo sensed what she was thinking and took her hand again. I'm very glad I met you, Gabriella. You are a wonderful friend, he said, and for some reason, the girl felt sad. She suddenly wanted Leo to treat her differently than just as a friend. But, of course, she was too young for him. They walked around the park for a while and then returned to the cafe, where Gabriella's mother met her. The girl hugged Leo tightly, knowing that they might never see each other again. The next day, the doorbell of Gabriella's house rang. A courier stood on the doorstep with a bouquet of pink hydrangeas, which had a white envelope inside. Flowers for Senorita Gabriella, said the young man. Isabella, who had opened the door, raised her eyebrows in surprise. Taking the flowers, she thanked the young man and called her daughter. Gabriella came down to the living room and stared at the bouquet in surprise. These flowers are for you, said her mother. But from whom, the girl couldn't understand. For a moment, she thought it was Leo, and this thought made her happy. But when she took the white envelope in her hands, she saw the name of the young man's father. These flowers are from Signor Alessio, she told Isabella and, opening the envelope, pulled out a folded piece of paper. Dear Gabriella, the girl read aloud. I'm very sorry that everything turned out this way. I don't even know why, but I lied to the press, telling them a fictional story about the creation of our designer children's furniture. I am truly sorry that this happened. Therefore, I would like to do something for you. I know you are already quite grown up, and soon you will have to think about the future. You are a very capable and gifted girl, and you should definitely develop your talent. Therefore, I have written a letter of recommendation to the rector of one of the universities, with whom I am personally acquainted, and he promised to accept you into the design faculty when you finish school. While you still have time, I advise you to focus on your studies. I wish you good luck, Gabriella. Isabella gasped in surprise, and the girl felt like she was dreaming. Could it really be true? She would attend university and get a good profession. How lucky we are, exclaimed Gabriella's mother. I'll tell your father right away. With these words, Isabella ran upstairs to the bedroom where Hugo was resting. He had not fully recovered from his illness and spent much time in bed. Meanwhile, Gabriella reread Signor Alessio's note. Yes, he had acted unfairly, but he had tried his best to make amends. What he did was a real gift for the girl. 3 years passed, and Gabriella became a university student. She joyfully immersed herself in a new life, where everyone dreamed of doing something important and leaving their mark in the world of design. Gabriella met girls and boys from her course and even made friends with those who had similar tastes and interests. Together, they attended student concerts, plays, and other events. Each of her friends dreamed of meeting a good guy, but Gabriella was not very interested in that. She mostly thought about her studies and often drew in her notebook. After working on a real project, she knew a lot about the production process and now understood which ideas were worth bringing to life and which were better left on paper. One day, Gabriella's friends suggested they go dancing at a nightclub. She agreed but decided to bring her notebook and pencil in case she got bored. Gabriella wore a black shiny top and dark blue jeans, and she pinned her hair with a silver butterfly-shaped clip. She completed the look with long earrings with black rhinestones and was very pleased with herself. The club was crowded, everyone was dancing and enjoying the music. At first, Gabriella danced with her friends, but she quickly grew tired and secluded herself at a table to draw on her notebook. Soon, she was interrupted by one of her friends, Anita. Gabriella, I danced with such a guy. Anita exclaimed. Gabriella smiled in response. Handsome? She asked, pretending to be very interested. Yes, Anita replied, nodding towards the dance floor. Look over there. He's sitting at the bar now. Gabriella looked at the dance floor and was stunned. Sitting where Anita pointed was Leo. He was wearing a black silk shirt and black jeans, and his curly hair was styled with gel. Gabriella noticed that Leo was without glasses, presumably wearing contact lenses. She felt her heart beat faster at the sight of him. Isn't he cool? Anita shouted in her ear, and Gabriella nodded shyly. Yes, he is, she agreed. I never dreamed of such a guy. Anita exclaimed, rolling her eyes to the ceiling. I think he likes me too. Gabriella felt a slight pang of jealousy. Why was she sitting here with her notebook? For a moment, she thought Leo looked in their direction, but she wasn't sure if he was looking at her or at Anita. Did he remember her? Gabriella didn't know the answer to that question, but she knew she still liked him. Perhaps that was why she hadn't looked at anyone else. I'm going to talk to him, Anita said loudly. I can't miss out on a guy like that. Gabriella just sighed at her friend's words. How do I look? Anita asked nervously, looking into Gabriella's eyes. Amazing, Gabriella replied truthfully. Anita was one of the most beautiful girls in the department. She had long curly cocoa-colored hair and big brown eyes. Gabriella thought that next to Anita, she had no chance. She watched longingly as her friend walked up to Leo and started talking to him, coquettishly smiling, and the guy animatedly responding. Sighing, Gabriella lowered her eyes and opened her notebook again. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear Anita return. I'm shocked, Anita said. Gabriella flinched and looked up at her friend. What happened? She asked. Do you know what he asked? Anita pouted. What? He asked for your name, Anita said, frowning. Gabriella couldn't believe what she heard. Me? She asked, glancing quickly across the room. Leo was sitting in the same spot, looking straight at her. Confess, friend, when did you manage to snatch him up? Anita asked suspiciously, looking at Gabriella. We. Gabriella stammered. We used to work together. Worked? Anita was amazed. But you're only 18. When did you manage to work with him? Gabriella smiled, remembering the old times. It happened by chance. I just helped his father a little. And he helped me, Gabriella finished the sentence mentally. How mysterious, Anita said. It was clear she didn't understand anything and felt even more upset because of it. However, Gabriella didn't have time to explain because Leo got up from his seat and walked toward her. Hello, Gabriella, he said as he approached. The young man looked at the girl warmly and a little surprised. You've grown up. Hello, Leo. You look great too, Gabriella replied. He leaned in to hug her, and the girl felt the pleasant scent of expensive perfume. Anita hastily stood up. It seems you two have a lot to talk about, she said and proudly walked away. Gabriella didn't know if her friend was offended or not, but she was glad about the turn of events. Yes, it was very nice that Leo hadn't forgotten her. The young people indeed had a lot to talk about, so Leo suggested they leave the club so the loud music wouldn't disturb them. Gabriella agreed. Putting her notebook in her bag and waving to her friends, she followed Leo to the exit. The weather was wonderful, the stars shining brightly in the sky, so they decided to take a walk. Leo asked Gabriella about her studies and told her about his life. He had already finished the academy and was considering starting his own business. Of course, my father wants me to join his company, but I want to test my own strengths. Gabriella looked at him and nodded encouragingly. I think you'll succeed, she said. She would love to walk down the street next to Leo forever. The girl enjoyed every second of their conversation. They reached the park where they had once sat on a bench and listened to the fountain's noise. Gabriella always remembered that day warmly. Look, the park is open, she exclaimed. Let's go inside. The young people walked along one of the alleys and reached the fountain, which, unfortunately, was not working at night. They sat on the same bench as last time. The girl enjoyed looking at the stars. "What a quiet and beautiful night," she said. Leo looked at her thoughtfully. "What are you thinking about?" the girl asked in surprise. "Listen, Gabriella," Leo said. "I think we met today for a reason." "You think so?" the girl replied, and her heart beat a little faster. "I wonder what he means," she thought. "Your notebook. I noticed you were drawing in it. Can I look at your drawings?" Leo asked unexpectedly. The girl didn't immediately understand what he was talking about, then quickly nodded. "Yes, of course," Gabriella said, taking the notebook out of her bag. Leo began flipping through the pages, carefully examining the drawings in the light of the street lamp. "Gabriella, they're magical. You have a talent." Leo admired, and the girl felt a pleasant embarrassment. The young man returned her notebook and looked into her eyes intently. "I think we met to become partners." For a moment, Gabriella's heart stopped. In business, Leo finished his thought. He continued to look into her eyes, anxiously awaiting her reaction. It took a moment for Gabriella to understand his words. "Are you suggesting we start our own company?" Together, she was amazed. "Yes, you will be our creative inspiration, and I'll take care of the business side," Leo said seriously. Gabriella thought for a while about what to answer. "It's tempting, but I have no experience. I've just started studying." Leo suddenly took her hand. "What about working at my father's production? You already have some experience that shouldn't be discounted. Besides, I haven't started my own business either. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. The main thing is to start." Leo's optimism and confidence were contagious, and Gabriella smiled and nodded. "Okay, then I'm in," she exclaimed. "Then it's a deal." Leo smiled in return. Gabriella suddenly realized how happy she was to be working with Leo again. It meant they would see each other often, probably almost every day. The thought exhilarated her. She was ready to start as soon as possible. They exchanged phone numbers, and then Leo called a taxi for Gabriella. "I'll call you tomorrow, and we'll discuss everything," he said as they parted. Then he hugged Gabriella and kissed her on the cheek. Sitting in the taxi, Gabriella smiled for a long time, unable to believe it wasn't a dream. The next day, Leo did call her. He suggested they meet somewhere to discuss the details of their plan. "We need a plan, and to create it, we should have a brainstorming session," Leo said, and, after a pause, confessed, "And it's best to do it in a place where there's food because any mental activity gives me a huge appetite." Gabriella laughed. "Lectures at the university end at 2. I'm completely free after that. Then I'll pick you up at 2:15, and we'll head to the headquarters of our future company," Leo said. Leo was punctual. At exactly 2:15, he was at the university parking lot. Gabriella spotted Leo right away. Today he was wearing a bright orange t-shirt and blue jeans. She herself was dressed in her favorite blouse of a beautiful coral shade and a gray knee-length skirt. "We look good together," Leo noted as Gabriella approached. "Maybe we should choose an orange theme for our logo?" "Why not?" Gabriella shrugged. With Leo, she was ready for any bold moves. "That way, everyone will definitely remember us." Leo opened the door of his Jeep and helped Gabriella inside. Then he got behind the wheel and started the engine. "We're going to my favorite cafe," Leo said. "But I warn you right away, everything there is very delicious. I hope you haven't had lunch?" Gabriella shook her head. "I'm starving. The lectures drained all my energy," she smiled. "Great. Then we're on the right track." The cafe was very cozy. Leo seated Gabriella at a table in the corner of the hall and went to get the menu. "I'm so hungry, I can't wait for the waiter," he explained, turning back to Gabriella. She nodded in agreement. In the end, they ordered salmon burgers, an avocado and fresh vegetable salad, and cherry juice. For a while, no one spoke. The new business partners were busy eating. Finally, both satisfied their hunger and got down to business. Leo wanted their startup to focus on designer interior items, and Gabriella didn't mind. She loved everything handmade and suggested they focus on hand-painted ceramic pieces. These could be beautiful plates to decorate a kitchen or living room wall, Gabriella proposed. Or wall clocks, Leo added thoughtfully. Gabriella agreed it was a good idea. Clocks would be perfect for both the living room and the bedroom. And if we use a more childlike design, they could hang in a child's room. Leo nodded, his eyes lighting up. Yes, clocks are a more universal item, he said. I think we should focus on that. They spent the rest of the time planning their next steps, thinking about production, finding craftsmen, and so on. They stayed at the cafe until evening, then decided to take a walk. We did a good job, didn't we? Leo asked. Yes, we accomplished a lot today, Gabriella nodded. I enjoy working with you, Leo admitted. I think I made the right choice in a business partner. Gabriella was pleased to hear this. I find it very easy to work with you too. I feel like you understand me with just half a word, she replied. Leo stopped and took Gabriella's hand. I felt the same way, he said, looking into her eyes. Gabriella's heart pounded. Leo hugged her and leaned close to her ear. I think I see more than just a business partner in you, he whispered. Gabriella's knees went weak. She felt Leo's breath on her hair. Is that so? She murmured, smiling and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Yes, Leo breathed. Gabriella looked up to meet his gaze, and in that moment, he kissed her. She was overwhelmed with emotions. How long I've dreamed of this, she thought, but said nothing aloud. From then on, they met every day. They discussed business matters, met with the necessary people, and looked for a place to set up production. After work, Leo would take Gabriella to dinner and then drive her home, kissing her goodbye. Gabriella felt herself falling more in love with him each day. One day, Leo met Gabriella after her lectures as usual, and they went to the office he had recently rented. It was a small room in a large business center. By the window stood a table with 2 comfortable chairs on wheels. There was also a cabinet and a small sofa for visitors. Leo and Gabriella entered the room, and Leo took a laptop out of his bag. Placing it on the table, he entered the password and opened a file with Gabriella's design samples. Gabriella, I refined your drawings in a graphic editor. Take a look while I go get some food. I'm hungry, Leo said. Gabriella nodded and sat down at the table. When Leo left, she started reviewing the files and making notes in her notebook. Suddenly, a notification sounded, and a message from one of Leo's messengers popped up over the documents. Gabriella inadvertently read it. The message was from Leo's father. Have you thought about my proposal yet? We could really become partners. Just you and me, wrote Señor Negra. Gabriella found it hard to breathe. Could Leo be planning to deceive her? Was he going to use her ideas just like Señor Negra once did, leaving her on the sidelines again? Gabriella felt sick. She jumped up, grabbed her purse, and hurried out of the room. When Leo returned with burgers and 2 paper cups of coffee, Gabriella was no longer in the office. A girl was on her way home in a bus when her phone rang in her bag. As she expected, it was Leo. Gabriella rejected the call. Then Leo texted her, "Where did you go? The coffee and burgers are getting cold." The girl didn't reply. Leo tried calling her several more times and sent messages, but Gabriella stubbornly remained silent. The next day, after lectures, Leo was waiting for the girl near the entrance to the university. When she came out, she pretended not to notice him. Leo caught up with Gabriella and took her by the hand. "What's going on? Why aren't you answering my calls and messages? Did I do something to upset you?" The guy asked, trying to meet the gaze of the girl who was carefully avoiding his eyes. In response to his words, Gabriella just shook her head. She was barely holding back tears. "Tell me what's wrong," Leo repeated. "Honestly, I don't understand anything. Everything was fine, and then you just disappeared." Gabriella finally looked up at the guy, her eyes full of tears. "I just don't want to be used again," she replied. Leo was momentarily taken aback. "But who intends to do that?" he asked. "You and your father," exclaimed Gabriella. Her voice was filled with despair and anger. Leo was confused. "Oh, so that's what it's about," he finally realized. He sighed heavily and suggested they talk somewhere more private. The girl agreed. They got into Leo's car, and he drove them to their favorite cafe. There, he seated Gabriella at a table and, after ordering 2 cappuccinos, said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you right away. I didn't think it would turn out this way." The girl kept her eyes fixed on Leo. She really wanted to believe him, but she wasn't ready to make a final decision yet. She needed to understand everything. "When we started working on our idea, I met with my father to ask for his advice. I didn't intend to tell him the details, but he said that if I wanted his help, I had to tell him everything in detail. So, I had to reveal our idea to him." Leo looked at the girl guiltily. Gabriella nodded anxiously. "Go on," she whispered. "I didn't think it would turn out the way it did. My father was thrilled with our idea. Why didn't I think of this myself?" He wondered aloud and suggested that we develop the project together, telling everyone it was a family business. But I explained that I was working with you. Then my father said I had to make a choice. Having said this, Leo sighed heavily. Of course, I didn't want to upset my father, but I made my choice that very evening when we met at the club. Gabriella couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I told my father I would work with you. But he just laughed in response and said that a few days would pass and I would change my mind. Apparently, at the moment when you were using my laptop, he wanted to check if I had changed my decision. I'm really sorry it all happened this way." Leo anxiously ruffled his hair and looked at Gabriella. "Do you believe me?" he asked, looking into her eyes with concern. The girl hesitated a bit before answering, then nodded. "It hurt so much when I saw your father's message. I thought history was repeating itself, and now you would betray me. I couldn't look you in the eyes, so I ran out of the office. I'm sorry, I should have talked to you first before jumping to conclusions." Leo moved a little closer and hugged Gabriella by the shoulders. "I understand. You've had a negative experience, so it was hard for you to trust me. But I swear, I will always be honest with you." Gabriella wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled. "Leo, I believe you and I don't doubt your sincerity." With these words, she leaned against him, and he gently stroked her hair. "So, we're still business partners?" he clarified. Gabriella looked at him doubtfully. "But isn't it more advantageous for you to work with your father? He's very experienced, and with him, you'll be safe." Leo gently touched the girl's cheek. "Of course, you're right. But I prefer creating the project with you. And I don't care whether we succeed or not. Either way, we'll gain experience. And most importantly, we'll gain it together." Having said this, Leo kissed Gabriella. 6 months later, the young couple presented a new line of ceramic clocks for home decor. The public warmly received their product. Leo's father also attended the presentation. He had to accept his son's choice, and Señor Negra sincerely congratulated the young man. Leo called his beloved and said to his father, "Dad, I'd like you to meet Gabriella." Señor Negra raised his eyebrows in surprise. "But I've known her for a long time." "Perhaps, but not in her new status," Leo said with a smile. "Dad, this is my fiancée." 3 months later, Leo and Gabriella got married and went on a honeymoon to relax and get inspired with new ideas for their joint business. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.